Guys, I have to tell you that I was a little panicky. I talked to Jill and Rachel before we started just about agenda today and all that. And I know they're going to sort of kick off and share with people what their thinking is in terms of how you spend your time today. But I took a half a day off to keep a 7 and 8-month-old grandbaby girl, and her mommy's not here yet. She's my granddaughter, and that's my daughter-in-law. She's not here yet, but she's on her way. So I think I could manage for another 10, 15 minutes. She has a bottle, but when you hear my door knock, I'm going to have to step away and hand the baby off. So I apologize, guys. I'm like feeling the pain of every parent today, balancing work and child, which I normally don't have to do. So just want to give you the heads up.
Well, no worries. It's adorable sound right now. I depend on grandparent help a lot, so.
Yeah.
It's all cute.
Her and my son sort of try to not, her aunt keeps the baby sometimes, and they try to do their schedule where she doesn't go to a babysitter. So, yeah, so I help when I can, but it's usually Saturdays, but today's fine. She's a sweetie. If she gets too chatty, I may bring her over and you can meet her, but she's in her pack and play now.
Got
it. And I don't see Russ yet.
We can start without him.
He's in the room, at least, in our room.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, so he can hear us.
And he's mic'd.
Yeah, make sure you guys turn on your microphones.
So you come in over there.
So I know it's been a long while since I have been with you all, but have you all met as a group since we were all together last? I don't think this whole group has been together now for maybe,
2 months.
has it been a month or more?
Since October 15th,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So guys, I did do a quick powwow with Rachel and Jill. They usually send, just emails, let me know sort of what's on their mind in terms of upcoming agenda when we don't have a standing one. And so they've sort of got some thoughts. I know Rachel and Jill both may want to just sort of welcome folks, do any updates, and then sort of lay out how we think we're going to use time today. If you remember, there were a number of IBB issue statements, not a whole lot, but maybe 3 left that y'all didn't get to. And we're thinking that we will pick up the one around IBB process today. But with that, I want to kick it to Jill and Rachel just to sort of welcome folks, any updates they need to give and get us rolling, and then I'll jump back in.
Yeah, welcome. It's December 17th, and we've got 3 more days of classes until our winter break. That's my update.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good to see everyone again. I'm
Yeah.
sure we're all exhausted, but we're doing the good work.
Yep.
Exhausted might be an improvement.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think we're wanting Stephanie to lead us through, the process with finding our issues our interests in the issue of using the IBB process.
Okay. And guys, with that, I want to say that we did think about sort of in our little brief convo and a couple emails we exchanged, we didn't want to take on too much for, a 2-hour meeting, or really less than 2 hours right before holiday break. We also didn't want to take on anything that we might not be able to have a good breaking point at, especially if it was something that might be a heavy lift. So what we decided to do is just do a quick review on what are the issue statements that are left in your open folder, if you will. Remember, they were on a flip chart, then they sort of moved to a Google Doc. Lindsay may be the best one to get her hands on that, and or Rachel. And then the one that we know is in there is the one related to, how do we establish norms and best practices? We want to refresh ourselves on what that issue statement said around the IBB process. And then maybe today, all we do is understand the issue statement, unpack it a little bit, and then identify interest, and not try to go all the way through with it where it could be start to feel very rushed, because it's a pretty important one. So I don't know, Lindsay, Rachel, anybody want to look at what are the remaining IBB issue statements that were carryover from last year? And then we can zone in on the one that we think is in there regarding IBB process.
Dr. Hubbard's over there trying to pull out the chart.
Some of the charts might have disappeared.
I know we talked about, one was this negotiation process. Another had to do with PD, professional development. Another had to do with, was it resignations?
Grievance
No, the grievance
Oh,
process.
sorry, that's 2 years ago.
And-
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, the grievance.
Those are
procedure.
the three that I have in my notes, but I thought there might have been a fourth.
I have,
But we should confirm that so that you do know where those are. And we can sort of take the initial IBB one as written to see if that's still the correct statement and then sort of start unpacking it from there.
Yeah, there is the fourth
just-
one, teaching that priority standards, and I would say though, this year, that's all I've been doing because we can't really do much more than that, but anyway. So you're wanting us to find like the official,
I wanted the initial issue statement. I think it came from the district.
Yeah, so
And I don't even know that it was all that well thought out at the time, but we did keep kind of bumping it down saying, hey, let's see how we do on this IBB process because let's process it after we've learned or done one full IBB contract together. So that's how that sort of constantly got bumped down. And now let's go ahead and pick it back up before you guys are into your IBB next year.
So our original issue statement, which again was written a long time ago, but I think some of it would still be, an issue that the district would like to get addressed in this process is just that it'd be good, I think, for us to have a meeting of the minds and an agreement, however we as a team decide to memorialize it, about what our process is. So not use of the IBB method, I think, and maybe we memorialize that in our process, but just, I see some sort of subcategories of the process that I think would be good to get interest on, including our schedule and what we do with notice letters, and then some of the stuff that, sort of meeting norms as I see as a whole other category, which would have things like joint statements and, other issues like that. So I guess I see it as like a large issue of just what is our process with sort of sub things under there, not trying to make any edits to IBB as that process that we learned about and how it works, but just maybe overarching what is our negotiations process. If that articulation makes
Yeah,
sense for people, does
I-
anyone want to add to that?
I found some notes that we took on this. We talked a bit about joint statements, we talked a bit about how to deal with tentative agreements when we come to those, what our meeting schedule might look like, using Google Docs, like these are kind of just like,
But
Nuts
those
and
were
bolts.
things you all flagged during the process.
right.
I think that, yeah, that's working or that's not. The issue
think these are all
statement
working,
itself, though, like if we are going to IBB this, then I would like to make sure that we have an issue statement that we can go back to as we address interest. So
Right.
is there, and Jill, I'm glad you've got your hands on that document too, but is there a copy of the issue statement?
That's what I'm looking for.
I have one
Okay.
from when we met in October. So, and I think we had kind of edited that when we met. And so I have, how do we continue to use the IBB process year-round to problem solve collaboratively while remaining compliant with the Kansas Professional Negotiations Act? And then I have over here, and not waive rights. So I don't know where we inserted that in. But that's the last one I had, was as the issue statement.
And that's how I see it too. How do we utilize, I'm sorry, can you say that again? Was it like, how do we?
How do we continue to use the IBB process year-round to problem solve collaboratively while remaining compliant, I'm assuming, and that's where the and not waive rights,
Yeah,
with the Kansas Professional Negotiations Act?
yeah, I think that's a good, I think we could take out things like year-round and not waive rights as being part of a solution if we wanted to, but
Good point. That's a good point. I think year-round is a solution, and I think not waive rights is an interest. That's a really good call on that one, guys. Just in terms of pure IBB, how could we simplify that statement? I hate that Lindsay has to keep reading it, but or we could screen share. But Lindsay, would you read it one more time? We can think about if we can take
I can
out
also
the
put
interest.
it like in the
and-
group chat so people can read it if you want.
Yeah.
Let me, okay, how do we continue to use the IBB process? We're taking out year-round? correct?
Yeah.
Well, because that's kind of like already doing a solution.
To problem
Right,
solve
that may be, maybe
collaboratively.
one of the things you guys decide to do out of this issue statement, but I don't know that you want to embed it in the issue. It's almost like, how do you continue to use the IBB process? I don't know if it's effectively or what.
Okay.
And then again, being compliant with the statute is more of an interest. It doesn't have to be in the problem statement.
So that's I just sent in the group chat, in Ring Central, the, issue statement. We can edit from there.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, I was just about to paste it, but you know, whatever.
No, I like to make it complicated for myself.
What do others think about simplifying that? Right? Again, I mean, it's like just in terms of, being compliant is an interest. I mean, guys, you can embed it in your issue statement, but what thoughts do you guys have on simplifying this issue statement? And we can move on to your interest.
I mean, compliance with the act is that whole part is an interest, honestly. I mean,
Well,
perhaps the most simplified thing is just what's our process?
So then just
problem
saying,
solving collaborative is an interest. It's just, how do we use the IBB process?
Did you hear that?
I didn't hear the end. It trailed off.
What does the IBB process look like for Shawnee Mission and the Shawnee Mission NEA?
I mean, I think both of those things are going to either a form of what's on the chat or what someone just said. Though both of those are going to get us to interest, right?
Yes.
And then, yeah, right. So either one, but somebody should, or I have been using a Word document. Usually I'll take notes in a Word doc, and then I've been sending it to Jill and Rachel. Do you guys want me to go ahead and continue to do that? And I'll try to capture interest that you guys start to throw out to me
We've
here.
got a shared Google Doc in our shared Google folder that someone has been taking good notes in, but anyone can feel free to add in there, especially if someone's talking. It might be good to help that person out and start typing. So
Which one is it?
it's labeled
in the-
2020-12-17 meeting notes.
Oh,
so it's in the 21-22 folder.
got it.
And so guys, does someone want to volunteer to do that? And if so, a lot of times, if I were in the room, I would probably, flip chart or have someone flip charting it while I'm facilitating the convo. So if somebody will do that, but I will say that I may stop you all to make sure that note taker has captured what, I think or what the team thinks that you've heard. So if someone wants to take notes, then I'll just verbally facilitate, but I may just pause to make sure our note taker has it. And then also, sometimes when whoever's taking notes, sometimes if I try to summarize what I think someone said, read that back to them and say, is this what you're saying? So we make sure that we do kind of capture what people are saying.
Should
So
we
if you remember,
share
our
screen?
5-step process is identify the issue. Why does it matter? What are your interests in it? Why do you want to figure this issue out? What are your interests? And then we brainstorm solutions. So if we're just going to talk about interest, I may put this baby on my lap, guys.
It's totally
If we're just
okay.
going to talk about interest, I think, Rachel, you have the first one that we sort of pulled out of the issue statement. If you want to go ahead and go with that. And then other folks just put, why does this matter? What are your interests?
So it sounds like she's saying move on to talk about
Interest.
interests.
Yes.
Okay. And do we just want to just throw out anything in the whole process in general, or just start with are you wanting us to start with the compliance issue?
Well, I
of,
mean,
like,
that's
what
the one
act
that's, I think,
requires?
already sort of in front of us because we sort of pulled it out of the issue statement, so.
Okay,
And I know
okay.
this is probably the most unprofessional thing I've ever done in my life, but is she not adorable?
Oh, my gosh.
It's
Are you-
2020, everybody works with a baby on their lap.
Oh, goodness. It's a first time for grandma.
Oh.
That's awesome.
So when you talk about being compliant with the Kansas Professional Negotiations Act, that's broad. I don't know if you're going to want to come back and be specific about it. But let's just, as we are putting out interest, throw it up there, and you may come back and sort of, pick it apart a little bit. But what other interests do people have in making sure that this, what this process looks like?
Sure. I would say for future teams, because we're not sure, what teams will look like in the future, I want to make sure we don't hinder those teams from being able to choose their process or their schedule or, that kind of thing. So looking out for that. I wouldn't want to limit the number of issues that either side could bring. I know the statute has, the 2 mandatory topics and then 3 additional.
So I'm going to
So we'll
stop
talk
you
about that
there and
later.
say the first thing that you said, whoever took notes, how did you capture that?
So I know Michelle's writing and I'm typing. So I had put in there just, because since we had taken it out of the interest statement, ensure compliance with Kansas Professional Negotiations Act. Ensure we're not hindering future teams in the process. I don't know if we need to explain that more in our notes or if we all kind of know what that means.
Well,
We'll
yeah.
just have Lindsay share her screen.
Yeah, we can have
Well,
Lindsay
what
share her
what do
screen.
you mean by that?
I just mean
Jill?
if we memorialize it in a negotiated agreement, then it has to be done that way year after year after year.
Yeah.
And we don't know what teams will look like in the future, what the makeup will be, and how we'll want to do things, so.
And maybe not being so rigid.
Rigid, yes, I don't want to be rigid, for sure.
That there's not, in language about the process, however that
That's-
might be.
I get it. Guys, if not, ask your colleagues, to clarify what they're raising. Now I get what you're saying. In other words, allow some flexibility because it's not always going to be the people in this room that are going to be doing this.
Right.
And then after that, were you talking about, I don't know if you were talking about, I think the second thing you were starting to go into is, you said not really limiting the number of items that you can bring, but there is also the sort of statute. So say more about that.
Yeah, one of the mandatorily negotiable items is hours and amounts of work. And for the past however many years I've been on the team and number of years I've been in the district, our association, when we write a notice letter, will have a number of issues that fall under hours and amounts of work. Our entire Article 12 in the agreement is pretty much all of that. And so an interest is not to limit the number of issues we can bring by saying you can only have, 1 hours and amounts of work, 1 compensation, and 3 additional. Do you know what I mean? I just kind of felt in past discussions, that's kind of what it felt like, Rachel, you were thinking, so.
So would some clarity with that be not limit the number of issue statements? Because we can only,
Yeah, the 5.
yeah,
So that's definitely not, I totally understand what you're saying, and that's always a rub between school district employers and teachers is like, well, what does that mean? Because the language of the act isn't clear. And I think we can have a process that we don't even have to get to that. What I think our interest is in terms of compliance with the act is doing notice letters in such a way that both sides can have an understanding of which items either side is trying to negotiate under the act as negotiable items, and if on those items we're seeking changes to the professional negotiated agreement in terms of additions or revisions to the language. Does that make sense?
so wouldn't,
So you're saying if we brought other issue statements that weren't listed in the notice letter, that's where you see a,
I think it would be helpful if both sides understood what we are negotiating on to change in the contract or add to the contract.
Okay.
So wouldn't that be on the issue statement on that form? There's those check boxes, and there is like a discuss, new language, alter language. Like, maybe as a team, we just need to come up with a common definition of like why we would check this box and why we would check this box.
Right, and have an ability to tie that back to the notice letter, right? So like, let me pick out, like name any mandatorily, like what's something that's in terms of, in conditions, that's like leave, the amount of sick days, right?
Sure.
So let's say as one of your 3 topics, you know, you said we would like to increase the number of sick days we have, then you would say, we're noticing this up under this part of the act that says 6 days are mandatorily negotiable, and we're seeking to revise the language in Article 7, Section 2, blah, blah, blah. So that we know what that is, or if it's not done in the notice letter, it's done some other way. So that at the start, we know what changes we are seeking to the actual contract versus things that we are seeking to resolve as like discussion points or
Okay.
whatever those other boxes on the issue statements that Stephanie provided were.
And what if we're not sure exactly like where it might fall in the negotiated agreement, or we're not sure what the solution would be yet? We just know that this is a issue. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
Hey, guys, can I make a quick recommendation? Lindsay, if you will just put your cursor before not limit, I think you guys, that you're talking now solutions,
Yeah.
Okay.
but I want you, so, right, so I don't think you should get rid of some of the conversation you're having. It should be bumped down. When we get to solutions, those ideas will be there.
Okay.
Even not limiting the number of issues is really a solution. Can you rephrase that on what the interest is, Jill? Because I want you to be flexible to different solutions, so you have to rephrase it to make it an interest. You don't want to limit the number of statements because
We want the ability to address concern, you know, we want
Yeah.
everybody to have the ability to address concerns collaboratively. No, I think.
right? So I mean right, you're getting closer to your interest there. Because not limiting the number of issues is sort of your solution on how you meet your interest, but you're not
Like
saying
a
your
full
interest.
ability to
I want you to say
address
your interest.
issues for next school year, really that either party has, right? I mean, we have that, I would say, I think we have that interest too. You know, an open ability to address.
You don't want unaddressed issues, like neither party, I would think, wants issues that aren't being heard or addressed, right? That's more, however you want to word that, that is more y'all's interest.
Okay.
When you get into, do we limit, do we not, you know, how does it match up with the letter? You're getting into solutions there.
Okay.
So in an attempt to build off of that interest, could we say something like an interest in determining, acknowledging when we're discussing versus when we're negotiating?
That would go, that's a more concise expression of what I was trying to say.
Okay, and then I'm going to ask you because why?
There's implications to both parties. If we're past the notice letter stage and we start talking about something, and let's say it's something totally, I don't know, totally that's within a managerial right. I'm not going to pick something, and then we start talking about it, well, then we've agreed to negotiate on it. And we also maybe create a misperception, which has happened before on this team.
So again, I'm going to say, and I'm not sure, was that Mike who said maybe you guys identify what is, you know, negotiating and what is not? Again, that is a solution because you're trying to address an interest. I need you to say the interest so that later when you get to solutions, you're not so tied into one way, you just tied into addressing the interest. So you want to make sure you're identifying what is negotiable and what is just, you know, not, but you're still going to have the combo because you got to finish that sentence to get to your interest. Because why?
I think the interest is to clearly understand the purpose of our conversation. Is the purpose just for a discussion? Is the purpose for feedback? Is the purpose for, we want a language change? Is the purpose, we don't really know, but it's not working the way it is, so maybe we want to negotiate? But I feel like if we know up front what our purpose is, we are less likely to, I'm just going to be real, land where we landed the last time we met, where we were all frustrated, right? Because we had a different perception of why we were here. So I think if we can establish up front
So
our
then,
purpose.
would the, I mean, the interest would be for us all to get along. I mean, like,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Like, that's the simplified version, and then the solution of, for all of us to be able to get along is for us all to be on the same page.
The interest is to collaboratively work to solve problems.
I would say when we are past the notice letter stage and we're all discussing at the IBB table, that is negotiation. So if something is going to come up that's not in the notice letter, we might need to say, okay, we need to have this discussion with a smaller group, like Linda and the superintendent to be, or Fulton. And then, or if, like when you guys wanted input from elementary teachers, maybe that didn't need to happen in an IBB session, that needed to happen just with the elementary teachers. Like,
So
our
you-
team doesn't have to solve everything, right? We just need to.
I think that's really part of the question. I
Right.
mean, is our role to only negotiate? Because if it is, then that's very clear, right? I mean, it would be noticed, we would negotiate, and that would be what our purpose is. But I thought earlier we discussed about meeting year-round or
Right.
collaborative problem solving, I think that's different.
I think we're getting
Yeah.
away from Stephanie's guidance, but I
Yeah.
agree. We're thinking about solutions, but if we say that this group is express purposes for negotiations, and then there's another group, or we redefine this group after negotiations are over, and then it's discussion, it's problem solving, it's whatever. But again, I'm getting away from what Stephanie's direction is, I think.
So is the question, do we have an interest in having, like, I don't know what to call it, informal negotiations time and a formal negotiations time? Do those not overlap? Do those overlap? Do we have an interest in this team discussing things that aren't under the Professional Negotiation Act, I'll say that affect our professional employees and our district?
Yes and no.
Well, if you look at your interest statement above, full ability to address issues and concerns from staff and district.
Yeah.
That's not limiting, right? What maybe I'm hearing the interest, and I don't know, it sounds to me like the interest is when you're talking about identifying when it's contractual, when it's negotiations, and when it's not. Is it so that there's transparency and trust and a comfort level to have frank discussions, and that you can't have unless you know? In other words, is the interest to be able to let your guard down with full transparency on what is being brought forward? I don't know.
I think that was important last summer when we had all those extra talks.
Yeah.
Especially with all the opening in COVID and, newness of everything.
Yeah.
I worry that focusing on some of that is the dragging the feet to the old process. For me is like, it's kind of one of those like apprehension about fully trusting the process and reserving, I don't know, I can't articulate it fully. That's just kind of the feeling I get, and I wish I could say it better, but sometimes the shop teacher brain's not fully articulate.
Yeah, like trusting the IBB process, that it's going to work, that it's supposed to have both parties mutually agree to the solution. Whether the solution's in the negotiated agreement or whether it's something else, like what we did last summer. We didn't put a whole bunch of stuff in the negotiated agreement. We had lots of things we agreed to that were just,
We did.
wrote up. So trusting that the process is going to work in that way, that it's not going to break down and turn into something that happened in our past. And I mean, truthfully, fact finding, that was the first time that had happened in years and years and years. So, looking forward and trusting the process.
I mean, I would definitely say, and maybe this backs it up a little, I definitely have an interest in us not getting into having a process that is set up in a way that we don't ever have to really get into discussions about, one side says, well, I think this is negotiable under this language in the act, and another side has to say, well, no, I don't think that is. I would like to have a process that doesn't ever make us have to do that,
Okay.
to make anyone have to say, no, I don't think that that's you know.
And so guys, when I encourage you to stay on interest, but when you're coming up with solutions, like the idea that I think was brought up, like, being able to identify whether you guys want to incorporate that on your issue statement or not, or you have to have some conversation and you'll jointly identify together whether it's, an item to be negotiated or not. It's okay, Lindsay, as a note taker, to sort of drop that down under possible solutions. Just know that we're probably not going to pick up those solutions until next session. But in order to capture some of the solutions that are coming up, yeah, there you go. Yeah. So it's really in order for people to trust each other, have transparency, have the ability to let your guard down, to know what kind of conversation you are getting into. But what I'm hearing you all say is this issue, the interest that says a full ability to address issues and concerns from staff and district. I'm not hearing anyone here say we don't want to talk about anything that's not negotiable. I'm not hearing that. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes.
You're just saying you want to know, you guys want to know going in, what is it that you're talking about?
Yes. So
I think-
I put in the notes as my interest, avoid conflict regarding negotiability of items.
Okay.
That's a good interest. That's a very good interest statement. Avoid conflict regarding negotiability of items, right? How you do it, you're going to explore next session. And if, ideas that come up can go under there now, but what are the other interests?
Have a reasonable number of sessions and a doable schedule that works for everybody on the team.
I'm trying to think how to say that.
I have an interest
I have an interest to do this before summer.
to move.
So is it a lot enough time to be effective?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, we all have very busy work schedules and personal life schedules, and I think that coming up with a schedule that works for everybody, I mean, like we did, but then what does that mean for this summer? We haven't talked through the summer, we haven't talked through when we might have the data we need to have the discussion about compensation, but maybe kind of fully figure out our schedule, and with enough flexibility though, so that we can plan our lives and not have this, well, I don't know if I can do that this summer because I might have a negotiation meeting and I don't want to be the one person that says I'm not available, or.
Well, if we leave all the heavy lifting for summer, nothing will get ratified until August.
Right.
I think that would maybe be an interest for
There's an
me, is
interest.
that we start, we do training and we start as soon as possible, so we're not waiting till the end of May. I think that would help make it manageable for everybody.
I would echo that.
I don't know if that's a
forget to capture what I
solution
did
or
here. I
an
think
interest,
Rachel
but
say-
a little both, probably.
Does everyone have an interest in trying to, I mean, I don't think we're ever going to completely avoid the summer, because there might be years when we have sufficient data to have the compensation discussion. There might be years when just like you did this year, right? You might say, we're not comfortable until we have that information. So,
But I think if we start, February, then we get majority of the heavy lifting done, and we don't have to do multiple days every week
in the summer,
all day long, just because it's exhausting for everybody.
So maybe.
So you guys
try
are
to
starting
get
to
everything-
brainstorm what the calendar looks like.
Well,
So I'm
so
going to
you're-
keep you on interest, and I think you've captured the interest here. But what
think-
about what you all have said, and it may be in the notes you took when we said,
I know my
best
life.
practices for next time? You all did say something about, well, you cannot really coordinate your meetings with, for example, the benefit committee. You can sort of at least do, I think you said, and this may be a solution, heavier communication. In other words, ensuring that you have the information that you need to actually, bargain. So I don't know how you want to put that as an interest, but I know that you've said that.
I think that the past,
I'm bad at this when I jump in.
oh, hello.
I
Did
don't
the
know how
baby
to
mute
say
you?
this in a better
There you
way,
go.
just start process sooner.
Well, again, that would be a solution, right? But your goal is to, adequate time to be effective and still manageable. I think that's good.
Well, the
But what
interest
is the way
is
you
to
express
have,
your
to
interest
try
in
and
having
have the
desired
process
info
wrapped
that you
up
need?
by the end of
There
the
you go.
school year.
Yeah.
So before teachers leave
Before,
for
yeah.
summer.
So avoid intrusions on our summer?
No, it's just the interest to try and have negotiations done before,
Right.
well, well, my point is that when we try to ratify anything, we do it through school. If people aren't, at school, then we won't do it till August. If we do it before people leave for the summer, we can get it ratified sooner. So that would be, the interest is to try and have it ratified before summer, before teachers leave,
And I mean, that's not always, I mean, we
It's an
can't rubber,
interest.
yeah, I mean, it's not always possible, but I think for all of us,
And I think,
sooner.
Russ, that we can chime in here of the fact that the past couple of years with finances is very atypical in regards to the past 20 years of knowing finances. So I think if you're looking at just finances lately, yeah, we're getting them much later than normal. Where in the past, when we would have started in February hardcore, we would have had a decent idea of what the next year.
Timing-wise, for business office to process everything, obviously earlier the better.
Yes.
So I like what I'm hearing, that we would ratify earlier the better. Finance, the last couple of years have been a little bit more stable than it has in the past, that we could count on legislators funding that base. And we were more, my numbers would be more concrete in May, and we could stick with it.
Yeah.
But as you bring up historically, and I don't know where we'll go in the future with pandemic or whatever.
Lindsay, I'm going to ask, on the attempt to have it ready to ratify before summer, is the interest like teacher morale and good union process, right? Because ratify before summer, again, might be a solution, but the interest is,
Part
is
of
it
the
related
interest
to
is
teacher
just
morale
not
and the
to-
union's ability to vote?
Not to eat up the summer for everybody, like that is just a lot for everybody, like,
Okay.
and if we have, if we're meeting monthly now, then we can get started versus waiting.
So 2 points to build off of Russ's comments. I think an interest would be, and I know we're not bargaining or talking about classified staff, but it does give you the ability to pay classifieds, provide any compensation increases to classified staff in a timely fashion as well, right?
Yeah, it would help that, yes, absolutely.
I think an interest is to be able to ratify, vote and ratify while teachers are on contract. That's the interest, right? To be able, an interest, I hear you all saying, is to be able to vote and attempt to ratify while teachers are on contract.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we want to finish in May, so that teachers, either that or we have to wait until August, I hear you saying. So the interest is to attempt to finish while teachers are still in contract.
Okay.
I have a thought around, you said getting the heavy lift, we wouldn't be able to get all the heavy lifting done in the summer if we waited till then. So kind of building off of what we did last summer, we did a lot of discussion that was beneficial, but ideally that could take place throughout the course of the year. And when we got to X date, now we negotiate. So I think that's what we're trying to get to, is establishing a mechanism in which we can have these discussions throughout the course of the year. When we hit a date, now we're ready to hit the
Contract.
heavy lifting, right?
Because that's got to be ratified.
Yep.
So would an interest, never mind.
Yeah, I'm having trouble putting it into an interest.
Is it sort of like, are you saying that you don't want, you want to have ongoing, I mean, I don't know if ongoing communication is a solution. I don't want to get sort of bogged down into it, but you're basically saying you don't want to have, try to do it all, have ongoing conversations so that you guys can kind of roll into the contract without bringing up issues or having first conversations about things, or?
It's
There's-
almost like not losing sight of the fact that at some point we need to have a ratifiable contract. And at some point we have to focus on what are the issues that are for the contract. So, and this goes into timing, right? So I would want to avoid a scenario where we have talked about things that, are, important for our school district and for our professional employees, but aren't maybe necessarily contract things. And then we have like 2 meetings left and now, oh my gosh, well, there's all these things that we want to do for the contract, so we can't send it for ratification. And then now we are trying to meet 5 times in June, and.
I think that's kind of hard though, because we might have, an idea that something might be language, and it doesn't end up being language. Or, the other way around, something we just are discussing and then as a group, we find the solution is best met through language. Like, I don't want to shortchange our process by saying like, well, we're not going to talk about this because we don't think it's going to be language. We'll save it towards the end. And then we come up with a great solution that is language and we're like, well, now we're just going to like hold on to this because we've already ratified.
Well,
You know what I mean? Like,
the interest is to have continual communication and teamwork. I think we need to start thinking a little bit more out of the box too, and understand that just because we ratified something doesn't mean that we can't say, you know what, this is super important. We need to put this language. We're in agreement of it. Let's do an MOU. I think this just, well, it's set from here. We can't do anything else. That's not necessarily the best interest of either side if something comes up. I mean, especially this year.
So does that go back to the interest of just understanding what the purpose of each discussion is, or,
Well, we're still relationship building, and we're trying to build a stable relationship in a pandemic, which seems very helpful and healthy.
I think you guys have, I'll tell you, everything you all are saying right now, I think you've captured in the 1, 2, 3, 4, in the bullet point that starts with full ability, all the way down to transparency, to avoiding conflict, to allowing adequate time, to vote it and ratify it while they're on contract. I think that you guys are capturing everything you're saying. I think you've already got it there, right? You're moving now into how do you do it, but nothing, I don't know that you need to sort of keep restating the same interest, because everything you guys are stating, it seems as though you've captured in these interests. Are there others? Or push back on that, like when someone said, hey, we want to make sure that we actually keep in mind that we have a contract to ratify. Well, I know I'm paraphrasing it, where you've got the ability to ratify it while teachers are in contract, should be able to keep you on track with that, right? The ability to, address issues that may not be negotiable. You've got that here already under an interest. Not wanting to avoid those issues, but know what they are. You've got that under transparency and trust issues. So I think you guys have already captured a lot of what you're saying right now.
Mm-hmm. Another solution I might add is to prioritize, once we start the formal negotiation process and we've noticed things, like last year, and I know why we did this, and we kind of picked off the easy ones, right? We thought, oh, this will be an English, where did that come from? An easy language change, because it's just, contract language or something simple. And I feel like we pushed the heavy lifting to the end, and then it was like, well, we don't have time to do this. And so maybe we prioritize our items as a possible solution, prioritize those things that we know are going to be tough conversations and we know will result potentially in a language change in the agreement. Maybe we tackle those first.
We still have to build. And that's one of, that's one of the reasons that we did some of the easier stuff first.
Right. I get why it's always nice to be able to check them off, right?
Do an easy and then a difficult, go back and forth.
Or prioritize the things that, this has to happen in this cycle. Like, this is very important, and maybe we prioritize our statements as we turn them in on priority of where they fall for each team.
So does everyone envision meeting monthly going forward? I think I do.
Yeah, at least, actually. Just to make sure that we get enough time in there. And, I mean, a 2-hour session probably, is not going to be the best. We were doing 6 hours, which is probably too much, but maybe even more than that. So I don't know if we want to look at either going later, than a 2-hour session, or doing some kind of
Every other.
half days where we'd have to have a sub.
The problem for right now is we're not going to be able to use subs,
Right.
likely.
So meeting at least monthly, and then once, I'm just brainstorming, once we hit an established date for when we are starting this year's negotiations, we establish a schedule to get that accomplished, and then we return to monthly meetings. Is that kind of what the group think is?
Yeah, I want to make sure we have enough scheduled, to accomplish the ability to vote and ratify a contract while teachers are on contract. I was reading one of our interests.
Right, that's good, because I think you guys are going to, once you start these solutions and put something together, you're going to test them against the interest, right? Does it the interest, or at least not harm it? Jill, you had said you had a document that I think Rachel maybe was keeping throughout on things that you guys wanted to flag for when you did this very process. Before we get much deeper into solutions, do you want to see if there were any interest in that document?
Michelle, that
Looking.
second to the last bullet point that starts with prioritize, is that kind of summarizing what you were saying?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think you captured it. I think I don't know if we're looking for something else, but I think another possible solution is to establish an actual date where we start where we exchange letters. I mean, if we're not going to use the state issued one, then a solution is to establish what that is.
I would suggest another solution would be if we continue to use the interest statement form, building off of what you suggested, a check mark. We're interesting this, we are discussing, or we're negotiating.
Yeah.
And then we agree to it as a team.
There's something like that on there.
Yeah,
We just
it
might need to
has-
revise a little bit.
I think
can show you.
also is something we had talked about was exchanging letters, but not necessarily opening them. In regards to, because I don't remember exactly, but it was,
I found the emails. I was looking back and forth how we discussed that, and I think that was one of the things that we didn't communicate well on, I think, because I think in at least on our minds of the NEA side, we thought we would exchange the notice letters because you had to by statute, but we wouldn't open them because we wanted to hold true to the IBB process, which we thought you don't look at the notice letters because that would kind of put the solutions out front, I guess. But then I reread what you wrote back, and it was something like, we agree not to, until after the training, to open the letters after we've mutually agreed to. And so I think maybe you thought we still would be opening them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so
So that's something that,
maybe we can do, this is not really in form of IBB, but just explore. So my understanding, and I want to hear from you guys too, my understanding of the reason why the Professional Negotiations Act says to do notice letters is because we are acting in a representative capacity, right? So I'm not deciding, the entity that I represent is deciding. And so that way we can go to the entity that we represent, your group of professional employees, our group of board of directors, and say, these things have been noticed as the things that we are going to be negotiating this year, and then do an adequate job representing, but also sometimes following that, you'll have a discussion about, well, what do you actually mean when you say this, to make sure that it is something that, falls under the act as an hour and amounts of work issue, or as a amount of leave issue, or something like that. I mean, we don't even have to do notice letters technically, but it has implications that we all have to know about for if we would ever get to impasse again. If you haven't noticed something, you can't take it to impasse.
I'm almost wondering, because from, the times I've done this, the notice letter, you read it and you're like, oh my gosh, what is, like, it
What are they
puts that
thinking?
kind of like on edge feeling of like, what's going on? Where, we exchange our letters, but I know this summer, we brought in our issue statements and we said, hey, this is what we want to talk about, and we explained why, and if we wait till after we share those issue statements to actually open the letter, because then I feel like, for me, I'm able to give kind of the benefit of the doubt and understand where you guys are coming from versus just reading the notice letter and jumping to all of my own conclusions. If that's a way to kind of meet the standard of what we need to meet legally while also fostering some trust and like understanding amongst our team.
I actually agree with you completely, Lindsay. And so another solution to that may be that we're more specific in our negotiations letter, so that I think that's kind of what Rachel was alluding to earlier, is that to just say hours and amounts of work, it leaves it open to so many things, rather than saying hours and amounts of work specifically, we want to talk about this item, this item, this item. And then you don't have that. As we all know, in Article 12, there's thousands of things that could fall in there, not literally, but a lot. And so it leaves the mind going crazy, like, oh my gosh, what does this even mean?
So in a way, just make the notice letters match
The
the issue
interest statement.
statements.
Whichever way there's so many ways we could do that, I think, but even if we're at our first meeting, doing them all at the same time, or, there's lots, I've brainstormed so many solutions around, I would say an interest I definitely have though, and I think this aligns with what Lindsay said, is taking the stress off notice letters, or the possibility that someone will draw a negative conclusion from a notice letter or something like that. Like something that maybe takes the stress off notice letters. I mean,
Can we capture that up in the interest? Because if we don't complete this process today, we want to make sure that as we look at solutions, it addressed it.
yes.
Take stress off notice letter.
I know, but there's no P&A police that's going to come after us if we don't exchange notice letters by March 31st, right? But it just has implications that we all need to be aware of. If we do it earlier, well, we've met that, and there's no implications. If we come to agreement otherwise, like, we only noticed anything that has a financial component, because if we went to impasse, that's what it would be about, and everything else would just go on to next year, right? There's millions of ways we could do it. We just need to like go in understanding what the implications of that are, because the notice letter has legal implications, whereas the issue statements don't.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's where that was kind of where I was thinking, like, if we share issues, like, do the legal piece of exchanging them, but share issue statements. That way, we know exactly where everybody's coming from, because I think, as we all know, this process has to be so relational, and because it's so new, and because of the pandemic, and everybody's already on edge with all their other things, like, if there's a way to eliminate even that little bit of erosion, it can make our process go more smoothly.
Hey, and Stephanie, I did find another interest in some notes that I was looking at. I think it's an interest, using a facilitator.
Yeah. And for that,
We would like to use you.
and using the IBB method for that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think there's solutions to your interest, but is your interest to have, basically you're wanting to have, just basically, third-party direction,
Right.
And it could be a facilitator forever. It may morph into someone in your group that has the trust of the whole group. at certain times, and you just don't know where it's going to go. So I would say, just, third-party facilitation. I don't know that it necessarily has to be a facilitator.
Okay.
The way you guys just now took over sort of what I had been doing for your whole IVB process, this note-taking step process. Like eventually someone in your group or more than one person will eventually sort of surface as someone that talks more than I do when it comes to facilitation. And I sort of hang around until you say, hey, what do you think about this, right? So it doesn't have to be FMCS facilitator when you talk about this being a document that's flexible in the future. And then I want to see if you have anything else in there, Jill, but the other thing that I wanted to get in here when you all were talking about the statute is an interest that you have. In other words, does everyone in the room, and I don't know that everybody has to feel like they're a subject matter expert or equally comfortable with every item, but one thing I don't see in your interest is related to, the information that you all need to do your work is not listed in the issue statement. And I'm guessing that when you start to put together your solutions, you're going to have something about, information gathering or sharing. And then also something I said before, but I think the baby was loud. You all had a little bit of time, different than a couple other districts. I hope I'm not confusing you with someone else. You had a little bit of time that you were holding off on some healthcare decisions, or you had to kind of go blind on some healthcare decisions or make some guesstimates because you were still waiting on healthcare committee. And while you all said you can't like line up your meetings with theirs necessarily, you probably do want to think about how the other stakeholders and other teams timeline doesn't cause you all to have to not be able to ratify while teachers are under contract. I don't know if those are interests, but those are things I remember you had going on when we did this last time.
Also, I think every party feeling like and this probably goes with like prioritization and making sure we get anything that has to be done for ratification done in a timely fashion, but making sure that both sides feel like they've had adequate time for their issues to be discussed by the team.
Okay, guys, I'm going to go back on mute while Jill continues to look and see if there's anybody that has access to the notes that Rachel had taken. See if there are other interests in there or things you want to flag of the notes that every couple of sessions we'd say, oh, Rachel, put that in the notes on best practices or not, Yeah,
I think you kind of alluded to something there, Stephanie, where gathering information, when there was times that we needed to find out things from other people in the district. And one of those, a lot of times for our side or our team, was to talk to Linda Seek or ask her, our president, about different things that might be happening within the district since, at least on the association side, Linda's like her and Kevin are one of the main people that get the phone calls or try to problem solve during the year and work with Dr. Fulton and work with Michelle Hubbard on solving these things. And so I think we talked at one point about having the whole team agree when we need someone's information. And that was one of the reasons why, and this is kind of off of this, but that was one of the reasons, main reason why we were wanting to add another person on our team so we wouldn't have to constantly, invite Linda to participate.
I think it's awkward. I think anyone that needs to be part of I think that we have an interest for anyone who needs to contribute to the discussion repeatedly to be on the team, to be a team member.
Sure.
Because going back to the process, I don't, staying true to IVB so that we don't set up where it looks like anyone who is observing can contribute or be on the team, because the work's supposed to happen around the table.
Sure.
I don't know, as long as we have a manageable number of team members, I think 10's too much. I think 2's too few.
Right.
A manageable and equal number of team members, maybe.
I don't know that, I think it's hard to say equal because, we may have 5 and you guys maybe only have 4 people that you want on the team. So I don't, we don't want to throw people on the team just to throw people on the team, so I think, I think equal pigeonholes people in, but I also don't want to say, like, I don't want it to come across like I'm saying, well, we deserve this many and you guys
So maybe
can
like a
only-"
range, like, we agree we'll never have less than this many people show up to the table, but we agree nobody's gonna, and then it is constant for some reasonable period, like in general, for the year, we're gonna appoint people, and unless that person
So you don't have people like coming in and off of the team in the same year that
Yeah.
we're negotiating.
I like that we've all been together.
so some
And one of our
consistency.
original norms is we won't meet unless the whole team is here.
Right.
So we'd be violating one of our own norms if we agree to let people come and go without, I mean, obviously, if you need to bring in an expert for something, that's different,
Right.
but.
Jill, was there anything else in those notes or anyone else that's taking a look at them?
The one thing we don't have written that I think is really important is collaborative process. I think that's in everybody's interest. We've talked about it, but I don't think it's on the list.
Somebody wasn't listening.
You said it, you did.
I mean, it's in the actual question, so I didn't write it twice.
Actually,
can
in the
also
new-
type.
Yeah, in the
Those-
new question, it's not.
Those fingers can tippy tap.
Your fingers work too.
Whoa,
Dang!
I love it.
So,
was
this
from
goes
Lindsay.
to one of our solutions that we've already been doing, of joint statements, but, I'm sure everybody's had this experience where someone comes up to you and says, this is a good thing, this IBB thing is a good thing, it seems to be better, and I think having part of a process be something that instills, the stakeholders' confidence in the process. Is that an interest, instilling stakeholder confidence in the process?
It's not, well,
So,
stakeholder the right word?
like of our professional employees and our administrators and our
Constituents.
board? Or maybe it's something
The
about
people
being a
represented.
unified team or,
In, ensuring
Representative
confidence in the process, I don't know, I don't wanna get too
Wordy.
on who all it.
or maybe even just, well, certainly like in terms of keeping people up to date. Keeping interested parties up to date about our work.
Being
well,
transparent.
The entrance, holy moly. The interest is communicating, happenings of the group in a clear, transparent way, I don't know.
I think when you all said, I don't think it got caught in the notes when someone said instilling confidence, and then isn't communication a way to do it?
So maybe that's
Right.
a solution.
Yeah, so I think maybe the communicating would go under solutions and just like, our interest is instilling confidence in the process.
I'm gonna say it just like total caveman fashion. Like, it makes me feel good when I have a teacher or an administrator come up to me and not be nervous about the process, right? Like, you're doing it, I know you're doing the work, and just, have some level of faith or
The
confidence.
interest is having a transparent process.
I mean, we have transparency and trust
Yeah.
up there. I mean, I don't know if
Yeah, so I think then the communication part is the solution that
You're probably
hits
right.
that interest.
I agree with y'all.
So it's like trust here, but also trust in all those that are relying on this being productive.
I think so.
You all have said a lot about this process is so much about relationship. I don't see relationship and interest.
Uh-oh.
Do I?
I mean, would that, again, transparency and trust and ability to let our guard down. But, I mean, I don't know that it hurts for us to keep reiterating it, because ultimately, I think that's one of our biggest interests in this.
Do we put relationship in quotes before that?
We probably should have had that first.
I'll put it first and in bold. How about that? I guess just a question. Do we see, are we just, how do we envision formalizing this? Like, in what way? Because I also, like, we're gonna make this big plan, and then what do we do with it? We just,
I mean, I
You
think
know, like,
that's
that's
part
just,
of
I
the
guess-
solution for sure. One thing that I thought of, if we're taking notes on solutions, is just an MOU that's reviewed on an annual basis at our first meeting. That maybe to be organized and not, I don't want it to be like, I would want it to be super accessible. So just like as short as possible, and maybe just we pull from this like categories, right? Like team makeup, bullet, 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 you know, meeting schedule, bullet, 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 and just try and make it really concise. And it would be a commitment here at this team would be one possible way. We could hard code it into the contract. That might conflict with the interest of having sufficient flexibility.
Right.
And that would,
I don't really
That
have
would
an
honor-
opinion on what I'm going to say, but I want to throw it out there while Rachel's thinking about this. You all do have ground rules in a set of notes and or emails. Those are really, really good at bringing people back to holding each other accountable to the relationship and the process. So it might make sense for you at some point, as you are pulling all this together, to get your eyes back on your ground rules to see how relevant and how accessible those are for this team to be able to look to and say, I feel like this ground rule is getting, a little out of whack, or people are getting outside this ground rule. So just something you might think about looking at as you're working this, not necessarily now.
I think that could be an addendum to an MOU.
I also am cautious about anything that completely locks people in, because life happens. I could have something happen in my family where I have to step back, and I think it would be bad if, they were locked in and couldn't replace me with somebody else.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We would, and I think we can, there's a balance there, right? We know what commitments we're holding to each other, because I'm not gonna make my hair appointments on days that we have meetings scheduled. But we also can use words that give us things like reasonable or whatever, so that if I say, I can't believe it, Jill, I thought we were all coming to every single meeting and Jay's not here because his dog died. Like, we could say, well, look, we put the word reasonable in there. Like, you gotta have some level of reasonableness.
I don't know why you just had to kill my dog.
I don't know, I'm sorry.
Put that out there.
I don't like animals.
Sorry, Tiger.
I think
But-
reviewing the MOU yearly, though,
Yeah.
serves the interest of not locking us in or not locking
Right.
any future groups in to whatever practice we determine.
And it can expressly expire, right? So if this year we've said, okay, so we're gonna have our first meeting on this day, and we're all gonna sit down and review our notice letters and our interest statements that we've derived from those, and the next year we could do a different schedule.
Right.
But it would be a base framework that hopefully then doesn't result, gives everyone a good starting point. It takes minimal time to cater it to what is needed for that year and that team.
Right.
Stephanie, can I ask you a question about note-taking? So I wrote in there, because Rachel had said it memorialized in the P&A, but then right after she had said, like conflict, is that how we would do that in our notes, just so we're memorializing every solution?
I think so, so that when you get back together to pick this up, to start looking at zoning in on what solutions really make sense, how they come together, you've got more information that will trigger your memory about this conversation. So yeah, I think that's good.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we're
Yeah, I like it.
understanding how we're doing this.
I found
And
some
at this
ground
point,
rules
you guys have
from
brainstormed some
NEA.
great solutions, and you're going to start sort of putting your eye on them next time to say, how do we capture these, right? And what, whether it's an MOU or process guidelines or whatever. But at any time, if interest come up, go ahead and put them up there. Because what you want to do is you don't want to get to what you think your solution is, and then you think you have IBB'd this and you've got it done, and an interest comes up where you say that kind of messes this up at the end. So still be letting interest come up as you're doing this, if you like. Is there a need for support under interest? Is there a need for ongoing support, training? This committee, what do you all need? I'm hearing you say, you don't want to be bargaining your contract every summer, right? You guys need to have your time to be manageable and respectful of your personal lives. Are there any things that you all need individually or as a team that is an interest of yours if you're going to serve in this capacity?
I think there's an inherent interest to do our annual training together so that we're operating under the same.
You mean on IBB or on the Negotiations Act?
Yes.
I mean, we
right?
could. We could. We have to agree on who provides it or do alternating. Yeah. I mean,
KSD will do it.
The State Department.
I've been to their training before on it. It's pretty good. I hope
The
they
state
know
would
the
probably be a
stuff.
fairly neutral
Yeah.
party. So maybe engage in training together is an interest.
I just
With that, make a
remembered something.
Or just make sure that everybody feels confident in their knowledge base to be able to function, and maybe it is an annual training, but
Oh, that's maybe good. Everyone have a good knowledge base of the IBB process and the Negotiations Act is maybe an interest.
And the solution is collaborative
Or a
training.
working knowledge or something.
I remembered something from, we were talking about meetings, meeting, monthly and that kind of thing. I know we have ours set for 3:15 to 5. And the one thing with that is if we start getting into the process, we get the issues, we get the solutions, and then the ball is rolling and we're right there to have a hard stop. And I also know though, it is nice to know when you're going to be done with a meeting. But if we could have flexibility in, like our meetings could go an extra hour if needed and everyone knows that, or in the past, sometimes when we'd have our negotiations, it'd be more traditional, but when we were traditional, if we were really going with something, we would just keep at it and see how far we could get.
It's seasonal too.
Yeah.
If we're in
That's
the
probably
prime.
easier for us than, yeah, I'm totally, I think that would be great. I would hate, so have timelines that allow us to get to a good stopping point.
Right.
Natural stopping point.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So,
There's also it just popped in my mind, an interest to acknowledge when we need to take breaks.
Yeah. Know when to take a break.
not work ourselves to exhaustion, how about that?
Eat before the
I think that was
meeting.
one of our norms, wasn't it? That we could
Yeah.
call,
yeah, you guys did have your, I don't know if you called them values and norms or you called them ground rules. Those may have incorporated some of the things you're
I
thinking
swear I
about.
thought we had a ground rule that we weren't going to meet without all team members, but it's not on here.
There's something about
We might have had that.
breaking in there.
I don't even think that's on here. Oh, no?
The beginning ones.
Did you guys do your ground rules on a flip chart?
I just pasted it at the very bottom that we had last year.
Oh, okay. Thanks, John.
I forwarded out some ground rules that we wrote down in May, at one of our May meetings. But that was
Thank
a
you.
long time ago.
Not like 10 years ago.
I know.
It feels like it.
I think that you all did your second IBB training. Did we not talk about ground rules when you also got your homework assignment to do issue statements?
Yeah.
Maybe put on somebody's homework is to go back and try to at least compile. Oh wait, somebody just put it on here. Thank you, whoever did that. Ground rules. Seek to understand is a wonderful one. I think the ideas are not proposals meant. People should have that ability to wheel brainstorm, if you will, so that there's not fear of putting out brainstorm solutions. It doesn't mean that it's a formal proposal.
Yeah.
Obviously a big fear for me.
And these were done before you did IBB, so it may be worth sort of reviewing these at some point to see would you change anything, remove anything, or add to.
Well, and I would think that each year, depending on the makeup of teams, those ground rules, some of them might change, not completely, but depending on group dynamics.
I'm reading over the interest to try and see if there's anything that we have left, like left out.
Anybody else speak?
Nope, I'm still on.
I will tell you, Rachel and anyone else has taken sort of a look there. You all got a lot further in this than I thought that you would. You all got a lot of solutions out there, and I didn't think we'd go this far. So you all should kind of think about, does it make sense to go ahead with 20 minutes that are left and see if there is some consensus, or if you want to have further conversation around, is it an MOU? What is the document, if you will, that you are going to, capture these solutions or this IBB process in? And if you did have consensus around how you're going to capture these solutions, perhaps someone could, if it doesn't, if there's time, perhaps a smaller group could try to draft something, and then, you could always sort of, pick it up and add to it anything you've missed today. But I don't want to cut you guys short if you're already to this many solutions. If anybody feels like there might be some consensus developing on how to memorialize this.
So maybe without deciding how we memorialize it, or even if we do, what if we went through each sort of category and we could look back up to the solutions that people had brainstormed? But what if we think about, okay, our process would need to include something about the timeline, for example, and start bulleting out there a solution, and then go on to the next thing. We need to have a process for notice letters and issue statements. Okay, let's bullet out there. Does that make sense? Timeline may be the easiest one to start with, just because it seems like we're not that far apart what we're thinking. So
sorry, go ahead.
So just in terms of solutions, well, the interests that relate to timeline is maybe where we should start. And that's ratifying and when teachers are available.
Well, and I think going into that, at least, one of the things Michelle had said is let's establish a date, because I'm assuming if we want to do our training together. I know at one point I think I had heard talking about doing another training coming in January, then, you know, we're into the new year and we're getting close to times anyway. I think timeline is gonna be the most sensitive piece of it.
It may be something we can allot time in the January training. There's been a conversation about doing a refresher, IBB refresher. Also, I've talked about just a survey monkey amongst the groups so that the group can give more relational feedback to the sort of ups and downs of the process, that we could have results in January and, you know, and sort of find the nuggets of goodness or the learning opportunities in that. You could also take some of January to review something out of this, if there's a sub-team that wanted to put something together. In line with sort of what Rachel's saying.
Are we,
Oh, sorry.
no, I'm sorry.
Go.
Just walking all over each other. Yeah. Go for it.
Okay. I was just gonna say, like, Rachel, I really like your idea of like, let's just start chunking it out and like get it, and then we can decide kind of what we're gonna do with it. Do we feel like that's something as a whole group, because we kind of have a big idea, or is this something that maybe a small group could, you know, work on back and forth? I know, when Mike and Jay and I just, at the beginning of this whole thing, went through and did a lot of work and then were able to sit down and kind of come up with the final thing to bring back to the team, I felt like that was super productive.
Maybe if we could, in our time looking at the solution as a group, delineate what we would see as like the categories, so that whatever that group is has good direction.
Yeah, no, that sounds great.
So I just started bulleting some out: timeline, notice letters and issue statements, team makeup, meeting norms. I'm probably missing some.
Like calendar training. Hey, the other thing I wanted to say is, do you all, when you ratified your current contract, did the IBB MOU that got you into this end up in your current agreement?
No.
Or was that in the previous agreement?
Didn't it just sit as a separate, just as a separate
Sitting out
entity?
there, yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if there was any language, wanted to make sure there wasn't existing language that would conflict or give, or already do some of this. I don't remember. I think it was more like just in the spirit of collaboration, you were going to IBB. I don't remember the details.
Rachel, I'm sorry if this suggestion throws a monkey wrench in your suggestion, in your thought process, but are we thinking about setting a date in which we start negotiations? Would that help the team? I mean, if we're breaking out into these smaller groups, if we knew that this was the date, and then as we're talking about trainings, or we're talking about discussion items, or how we're going to structure that, I mean, if we knew that this date is when we're going to start negotiations for 21-22.
Yes.
So I'll throw April 15th. I'll just throw that out there. We already have something scheduled.
I think that's too late.
Too late?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was hoping we'd have our training in January, and then we could start right away, you know, yeah.
I mean,
Right after
February,
that.
March, April, May is only 4 months. I mean,
February
it seems
18th?
like in the past, even when we've had really long meetings, you need, I don't know, 8 meetings.
Right, and that's why I think we need 2 a month.
So we would probably need 2 a month in February, March, April, and May if we decide that the goal is, assuming we have enough data, to try and get it done by the end of the school year for the next school year.
So would it make sense that, like, we do our training and, you know, kind of work on this in January, and we say February 1st is when we're gonna exchange letters?
Or the first meeting in January, whenever that is.
We have one scheduled February 18th.
Like, maybe it's better if, like, I don't know, like, I'm totally doing a solution here, but we don't do some like, oh, here's our statement, but we just bring them to the table and read through them together.
Like we did this summer?
Yeah, and just have them at the same time. So, like, here's our notice letter in terms of things that we think, you know, fall under the act and as a term and condition or as compensation hours and amounts of work. But then here's our issue statements. And on those things that are in our notice letter, we've checked negotiation. On these other things, we've checked some other box. I mean, like, is that all in the line with, is that at all in the realm of what you guys were thinking?
What if we said we would, meet to exchange and discuss our interest statements prior to a date? So that,
We have a little bit of flexibility.
well, we can I mean, maybe you say prior to, I don't know, March 1st every year, or prior to February 15th every year.
Well, I think we can put a date, a more specific date for this year, because we're going to look, it's an MOU that will be looked at every year.
I was just trying to keep
Yeah.
it more general
Sure.
so that they don't have to change it annually.
That's true.
Based on that flexibility statement, but
Right. That's true.
Well, training would be annually in the first meeting in January.
yeah, I think that would be good too.
Okay.
Our training could happen in January, and then that other meeting would need to take place no later than March 1 or something like that, which gave February scheduling to get us started.
You know, I've been on part of this process for about 12 straight years now, and years that we've gotten a contract settled during the year, when we met, we were meeting at least every other week.
Sure.
So, I mean, it was high frequency meetings. And if something was close to getting settled, we would perhaps add a meeting to get that addressed.
How long did you meet?
I also think, wasn't it February, how quickly we forget, but wasn't the date prior to the recent negotiations changed February 1st when we changed letters?
It used to be.
For
longer
years,
than that.
right?
We used to exchange letters way before the end of March.
I think the requirement, if I remember correctly,
Changed.
I think the statute was February 1st.
I believe so too.
Yeah, because we usually did it at the end of January.
Yeah.
And then we would be almost immediately after exchanging letters our first meeting was always about what were our letters meeting,
Right.
And then set date. It was, to get it done in May, it's because we did a lot of local work.
Right.
And honestly, I'm great with that, but we need to get the dates established pretty quickly.
Right.
So if we,
Especially if we're gonna have a team of whatever, range of 8 to 10 people.
so I put under team makeup and training, teams will receive annual trainings together during January IBB team meeting. Is that kind of what we were thinking as a group? Works for me?
I think so.
So our date
mean,
for
at
that
least
is
for
the
this year.
21st.
February 21st.
I'm sorry, January 21st, we
Oh,
have a
yes.
IBB
Scheduled.
session. And we, for team makeup, we would like to have Linda with us for that training and start with the 2020,
When's our board meeting?
21 to 22.
Monday,
No, I know. When's the next one?
There's one
I'm well aware.
There's one January 11th.
Okay, so I think we could
Okay.
do that. So maybe, team makeup, like, people establish their teams before the first January meeting.
Okay.
So that if there's a switcheroo or whatever, but,
teams will notify the other team of their team compensation members
I can write it,
before the January meeting.
yeah.
Will notify other parties.
And do we want to just put a range? Do we want to say 3 to 5? Teams can have 3 to 5. Do we want to say up to 5?
I mean, I don't know if we need to put a limit, but I know Stephanie has said that we're the biggest team you've worked with. So I don't know, I was going to ask Stephanie,
Well, are
have
we
you,
also the biggest district?
that's true, we are a
Biggest
large district.
Yeah, not biggest team, you're the largest district.
Okay.
Smaller district, one smaller district has a larger team. I mean, I feel like when you, I don't know, I mean, if you have people that are committed and relevant to the process, then, I mean, I think that's what matters versus a hard number. So you guys sort of make that call yourselves on
I
the number or
think-
the range or whatever.
That if our team compromises, or golly,
Composition.
yes, shocks you, when we get to that point, we haven't been working properly.
Yeah, I don't think it'll shock me.
No, I'm just saying as a
For
group.
each other, yeah.
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 If you get our
What I
email
tend, what is
before the January
problematic
meeting-
for the process is if there's too much saying we have to go back and talk to someone that's not here, that creates problems with groups. Or if you have folks that are on it for the sake of something but aren't really engaged or committed, or aren't committed for the whole, for all the issues, they sort of show up for their own, which I don't see either of those things happening with your team. So really, regardless of the number, again, it's, making sure the people that, can make decisions are present. While sometimes there is the need to go back and confer, but it shouldn't happen every session. And then also making sure the folks that are on it care about it all. That's the only input I have from facilitating.
Because I'm thinking timelines, if teams were going to change numbers, like we had said prior to the January training, but I know, for you guys that goes through the board, is there like a specific date? I mean, we're telling you now, like, I'm not saying that we're going to have a change, but like if we're saying that this is going to be the basic framework from here on out, does it need to be, do we need to say by January 30 or by December 31st so that you guys have some
Actually,
time?
we won't be, the board has to approve our negotiating team, if I remember correctly. They
Yes.
have to approve our members, so if we're going to change our membership, we're going to have to go to a board meeting, but we can do that January 11th.
I think that's what she means, like,
Like
should we have
going
something in there
forward,
that
should we
says?
notify it early?
You need to,
'Cause
yeah.
We
Notify
would
of our
want there to be a
intentions.
board meeting before our first meeting.
Right, so that's why I'm just saying, like, if we set a date, this time around, I don't know that we can do a whole lot about
Excluding
it.
this year.
Excluding this year, in
Yeah.
the future, do we say like a
By December
specific?
31st.
Yeah, do we say by
Yeah.
December 31st? That way, hopefully, there's always going to be a board meeting between
The 31st.
the
and-
31st and when our first meeting would be together.
Well, and if it's by December 31st, then the board would have to act in December, right?
Right.
Yep.
Which is what we would want in case we
Actually, we
did.
would want that anyway, I think, because
Yeah.
January, you don't always have two meetings either, and so sometimes you won't have, so that'd be risky. I think December 31st is the right date.
Okay.
Right.
Stephanie, for a training refresher, how much time, how many hours?
I was kind of looking at that. You all have designated 2 hours. If it's really strictly about the process, I think 2 hours is fine. If you remember, the full training had some things on recognizing your own communication style, recognizing different conflict styles. It had a practice in brainstorming. It had some relational things I had you do just to start solidifying you as a team, right? So for just a refresher, and if you're, if I'm not going to sort of redo all those things because you're solidifying yourselves as a team through the work, and I know Linda has been present through the work, depending on whether or not the district switches out a number of people, you may want me to do that, but if not, I think 2 hours is fine for a refresher on the process. And in that 2 hours, I should talk to Rachel and Jill in advance if you want to use time to not only have me do a refresher on the process, and we may also want to, have a finalized version of your new issue statement form that you or I, Rachel or Jill or I, can introduce the form that you want to finalize and anything you need to explain about utilizing it. You may want to make sure that you do, whether Rachel and Jill sort of co-present on this document or whatever it is you're creating here, right? So I think we could be flexible about what all we cover, but I think 2 hours is good.
Okay, I'm taking some notes here that I want to see what thoughts are. So I thought it might make sense to have just like a general process section, and I took some notes down there pulling from our solutions.
Yeah, when I was reading through that, when it says each team will prioritize, like with the issue
Oh, yeah,
statements.
that's under that.
I think that we did prioritize sometimes things that we felt were timely, right? That we wanted to, like, especially by the end of it, we were like, well, we really should get this one done before. But I think sometimes it would be difficult I think for the association to say like, well, this issue is much more important than this issue, because sometimes they're difficult
to not
to
qualify
compare.
prioritizing as, we're not saying that this one is necessarily most important to our professional employee membership as a whole, but we need,
To solution
I feel like we need
faster.
some way to say, we gotta do this one. It's not about importance, but maybe about, this one's gotta be done
Most
Timely.
timely.
this year before, by timeliness. By-
I think
by-
that stuff comes a lot more natural than you may want to reference it here, but doing that comes naturally for you all as
Okay.
you're sort of taking in the issue statements and then thinking about what do you tackle first. We had that because it was your first time. We had that concept of do the easiest first because, you shouldn't practice what what you're doing with the hard stuff, but that's not so relevant anymore. You guys kind of are a functioning team now. So I think that will come more natural than you realize in terms of what do we really have to take on and when. And then when you get closer in your timeline, reassessing, what's still left out here. Do we need to add dates? That kind of comes naturally.
Okay, does that make sense, what I'm typing under that second bullet under notice letters? That's, I think, where I'm trying to get at, or where my sort of nervousness about like, what are we, and going back to Michelle's statement of purpose, does that solve the purpose of like, what are we doing? Because my nervousness, and not to revisit past meetings, was like, when I pulled out all those issue statements, I thought, oh my gosh, am I committing on behalf of the entity that I represent to negotiate all of these things and potentially put them into the agreement, and potentially if we don't reach an agreement, then to go to impasse on all of these things. And if I had some way of saying, and I didn't because I didn't open the notice letter of saying, oh, okay, these are the things that we are saying are the mandatorily negotiable things that a solution very well could be putting it into the contract.
I think, isn't that supposed to be marked on the top of those papers?
Yeah, I mean,
Is that
on
is
the,
that how we had that last year?
like, on the top, they already say update, which is just housekeeping or compliance, which this is like the form that we got from Stephanie. Repair, which is like intent, application, or content, just cleanup language, basically, again. Remodel, which it says new or restructured concepts, which I thought like, when we did that, that was gonna be, our intent was P&A language. It says discussion, and then under it, it says permissive or exploratory, and then economic, wages, benefits, or direct costs.
I don't,
What do we think about
on the top of-
modifying that form to be more clear to suit our needs?
I don't think that's specific to the Kansas statute. So,
Right, that's an
so
IBB.
I was
assume.
thinking-
Where did you get that form from, Stephanie?
That's what,
It's
I
our
think,
district form, which covers 5 different states, so it's not specific to Kansas. And I always encourage the parties to make that form your own. I think I've sent someone the Word version of that. But after you use it the first session, the first contract. So now you've used it, I think you could do a form that works for you. What is important to have in the form is the issue statement, some comments for focusing it, and then, writing your input, though we do it as a group. And then, of course, marking the categories, but you guys figure out what those should be.
I was thinking that, again, we'd have that box, either discussion or negotiations. And then at our first meeting, we go through these interest statements as a team, and we agree, because there could be, things that we think are negotiable or that you think are negotiable, and there may not be agreement, right? And then we have that discussion at that first meeting.
Right, because if we know,
And then
well,
we
this
fall
is what
back-
we're really looking at, it's not what you're assuming, right, which we all do after we read these, like, oh gosh, is that what they're wanting to do or trying to do? But we actually have a collaborative discussion about this is what we're trying to do. So maybe we could have the issue statement form based, I think it's pretty close, but maybe we could make some of those boxes a little more, we could add boxes or make the language a little clearer or whatever, and have that as
I
like
do
an
think the
addendum.
parties do get a lot of benefit when it's just a language fix, right? Because those piles are easy to pull those aside, where they're just like, typo, expired language, we no longer do this. So those are good categories. But keep in mind, the parties should not, and I'll remind you in training, they should not bring what they want to do. They should bring the problem they want to solve.
I think that's my concern with saying discussion or negotiable is like, I feel like that's, if we brought an issue and saying, all right, we're negotiating this, we're we're already saying this only solution that we're gonna find acceptable is P&A language, or, you know, we're limiting ourselves, or we're deciding what we think the solution would be ahead of time. And I think this summer was great proof of, like, we maybe had ideas in our head of how we would solve the problem, and we didn't solve it in that way, but they were great solutions. And so, like, I just worry that saying one way or the other, we're deciding ahead of time what we think the solution's gonna be.
So how do we balance, and I totally get what you're saying. How do we balance that with an interest of not having one party have an expectation that, oh, this is something that should be received this way, or the solution should be, like, not upsetting expectations, right? Like, how do we avoid then, how do we still identify purpose so that we know what we're doing and there's no erosion of trust because one party thought we were doing X and one party thought we were doing Y?
I think that comes down to making sure that our issue statements really say what we want them to say. Because if I say this is the issue and this is the question I want us to work together to solve, I think that gives us a lot of clarity.
I think, yeah, I think it falls back to our interest, or everyone's interest, of complying with the statute. And there's some items that are mandatorily negotiable and there's some that aren't. And I think by allowing this open, free discussion, perhaps we would be agreeing to negotiating things that we don't have to negotiate, or the board would not have an interest in negotiating formally. Discussion, yes.
But it goes back to trusting the IBB process of, I mean, because it feels like we get stopped in, and this might have been the problem with continuing 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
There's a solution here, I'm just trying to.
Of the problem and that we're trying to solve is we have we're trying, our end goal is if we get to fact finding, well, we need to have our bases covered. Well, if that is the thought process of, well, we're going to end there because we're not truly doing the process, to me, of like, we get caught up on, well, we got to make sure these things are done in this way. It's just like, it's the same reason my 6th grader doesn't get his history homework done, because he's stuck in something and he's putting up walls in front of himself.
Well,
So here's something we could do, and it's an idea that I've had, if we're concerned about that, is we could have an agreement that our notice letters, for example, only contain the things that we as a group think are appropriate for impasse, right? So that could be compensation. We could do notice letters that we mutually agree are limited to compensation or items that have a financial component. That takes the stress off, but it has implications. That means impasse would not include those things because they weren't noticed in the notice letter. That would relieve our concern of going down a road of agreeing to negotiate something that's a reserve management right under the act. That's just one idea, but it's probably the one that you would, I think it's a big idea. We'd have to think about it.
But also, I mean, this is literally just an example. So we come up with whatever this problem is that we want to solve. We need a farm of cows from the moon. You guys' interest would be, no way. We have absolutely no interest in that. And so ultimately, any solution we come up with isn't going to comply with that. Like, I feel like at some point we have to say, like, if we brought something to the table, or you guys brought something to the table that we know absolutely is going to be a no-go for the parties that we represent, then we have to say that.
Be able to
Let me
accept-
give an example I think that might be a real one. We as in the board is very willing to discuss calendar, right? We discussed it last summer. Let's share it with Linda regularly.
We want feedback.
We want feedback for sure. We definitely want the feedback to make sure that we're complying with the agreement. As you all know, we can look at the calendar 30 times and there's still one more thing that we need to edit, right? but it's not something that the board is willing to come to the table and negotiate. So if that's in a notice letter, right, this is what you're saying, and we say, no, we're not going to negotiate it, then there's the rub, I think. But we're definitely willing to discuss and collaborate and work towards an agreement on calendar issues, but we're not going to negotiate and put it in the
And
P&A.
I think if it's an interest statement and we don't declare that it's just discussion, it's not negotiations, if, God forbid, we get to impasse, now we have negotiated it.
Well, and with that issue, we had to discuss the calendar because one of our interests was to add another parent-teacher conference day into our agreement, into our negotiated agreement. So we had to kind of talk about calendar
But
because
that's
of that.
language.
Well, right, what I'm
Right.
saying is we talked about the calendar. We weren't necessarily writing anything about the calendar into the agreement. We were just writing about when we're going to have our parent-teacher conference days.
There's a difference between you can negotiate to bring things to add to the calendar.
I mean, I think anytime IBB teams are fully functioning, you're talking about everything that the parties have an interest in, whether it's a mandatory subject of bargaining or not. Do you need to be able to have a way to express somewhere in the conversation about the issue statement that you feel it's not mandatory, but you're going to continue with the conversation to seek a solution? Because I mean, I hear what Lindsay's saying, because we saw it all summer. When you bring the problem forward, not until you brainstorm solutions do you know if the team is going to decide to do something contractually, but you're engaging in conversations that go way outside what's mandatory as you brainstorm solutions. Can there be a time that that's recognized as you're starting to put your solutions together? I don't know. Or is there something as simple as saying, if there's existing language, then it's certainly, you all know it's negotiable. There's existing language, right? And if there's not existing language, I saw you all as a team come up with some solutions that you didn't do language for, right? You came up with a solution, not just around the calendar, but you did a solution around something going in the administrator's training day. You had several things that didn't go in the contract. So it's very difficult because there are so many different ways solutions can play out. It's hard to say up front. It almost forces the parties to take a decision on what they want the solution to be at the beginning, which really goes against this whole process. So I'm just wondering if there's any way somewhere through that 5-step process that, when we do is it feasible, affordable, manageable, beneficial? If we get that far, is there also something else that, is it negotiable? And if the answer is no on that, does it, and if you don't get to an agreement that year, does the answer of no mean it doesn't go to fact finding? If not, God forbid you go there again, right? Again, I think it is about trust in the process, but we also have to acknowledge the many times Rachel, I think, has stated her concerns on behalf of counsel for the district. There's got to be a solution here. It just may not be right here in front of us, right? And it may not be one that you may find the solution in your next process, right? In your next IBB sessions, your next contract negotiations, you may find that solution, but I think it's difficult. Anybody else have any other thoughts on that? I am going to give a 5:09 time check, guys. What time are we going to tonight?
Well, we're done.
Okay.
But can I clarify, Lindsay, when you were brainstorming there, are you suggesting that when we got to solutions that the district would say, well, that's not, this is a management right, so we're not willing to build this sort of structure around it? Or because
I think during interest, like if we're talking about, we bring up something, just like if you guys brought something that we knew, really regardless of what the solution would be, it wouldn't be ratifiable, because we want to be able to sell whatever we come up with. Like, I think us being upfront about that during interest of like, hey, this is going to be a huge problem. Or if we bring up an issue that, you all feel like isn't something the board is willing to discuss, or, you feel like it isn't negotiable, then I think during interest, the appropriate time to say that would be during interest, to say like, hey, this is gonna be an absolute no-go.
Do you think we can do that while still, and I'm truly asking, while still avoiding conflict about negotiability, right? Because I have a big fear of being like the bad person on the team, right? Well, oh, the lawyer said that's not negotiable. I don't ever, like, I'd like to avoid being in that position of being like, well, now that we're at the solution, I really need to come forward and say, when I line this up, I don't think this falls under any of these categories. Like, I'm maybe, like, I think it's a possible, but I'm fearful of there having to be a declaration that far down the road.
Well, I'm saying during interest, like we start off from the very, like we do our interest statement, then
Okay.
the first thing we do is interest, and like, I think the sooner it comes out, like if that's the very first thing that we talk about after we discuss an issue and we delve into it, you know, and then from there we have as a team, a discussion, you know, you read the statute one way and feel like something isn't negotiable, we maybe have a different opinion, or we come down to like, can we have a discussion about how we problem solve this other ways, or is there a team that does this that isn't this negotiations team? You know, then we can say like, we're not gonna negotiate it, but these are some avenues to problem solve outside of the negotiations team.
Okay, I'm following you there. Then how do we marry
Yeah.
that with notice letters?
I mean, if we've noticed something and it isn't noticed appropriately, you know, I benefit of the doubt, I feel like you guys are gonna notice things in a way that you're gonna notice what you feel is mandatorily negotiable. We're gonna do the same thing. If we have a disagreement about that when we're discussing issue statements, then we need to have a conversation at the time, immediately when it happens, not hold on to it.
So maybe we just give each other the freedom to do a note at the outset. Hey, I'm cross-checking. This cows on the moon thing was in your notice letter. I'm gonna do an asterisk right now that the district's not, as representatives of the board, we can't agree to negotiate on this for purposes of the Professional Negotiations Act. We can agree to have an IBB discussion. And no one's gonna be the bad guy if they say that. Maybe, well, I disagree, we disagree, but let's see if we can still reach a solution anyway.
So I think we need to establish then, if the board.
Can she come to the mic so I can
Yeah.
hear?
It's not on.
Is that Linda?
Push
Oh,
the button.
it's a
Oh,
different
you got
button.
a different one.
Thank you. You know, there's mandatory topics and then there's permissible topics. So I think a discussion for this group needs to be, are we only going to talk about mandatory topics? Or are permissible, are you thinking those shouldn't be in our letters because they're not mandatory?
So I think we could build MOU language about that. My understanding is, once you've done it under the umbrella negotiations, and this is the concern, but I think we could just protect ourselves from this in the letter, is if we agree to talk to you guys about cows on the moon, we are negotiating it, and it could go to impasse. So if you want to come up with designated parking spots or something like that, then once we've talked about it under the umbrella of negotiations, it's a potential issue for impasse. And so that's maybe a little bit of my concern.
Well,
Again, I think we could protect against that in an MOU.
Well, so are mandatory topics though. So there's always that issue that you could go
Right.
to impasse. And I
Right.
think, so I think that's a point that needs to be clarified because we haven't in the past brought a lot of issues that are permissible and not mandatory. But it is, I mean, the district for years has always been willing to engage in permissible topics. Like I said, I've been doing this consecutively for a lot of years, and we've discussed a lot of things, and quite frankly, sometimes it's just to get that conversation going and out there. And sometimes we've actually, even with even not using an IBB process, we've come to many times we've come to language on permissible topics. So that's a twist if we're going down a slope in my opinion, if we're only concerned about mandatory topics. I think that needs to be clarified, because it also means we need to have our UNISERV director present at these meetings, because he is our highly qualified P&A specialist. So,
Yeah,
And
I-
sorry, I
When
wanted
you
to
ended
follow
up
up.
at,
Hold on. I'm done. Jay's hungry now. If we feel it's mandatory and you don't, and it's shut down, then it's not just, that, it's the possibility of filing a prohibited practice thing too. I don't want to get, if we're pigeonholing things into certain categories to cover our butt for later, it's also opening up issues. It's the this or that. I mean, yeah, I'm at that point.
I mean, again, I think it's different when you have, to me, the rub is we're saying that we are not going to limit issue statements, right? So we're going to have the freedom to bring all those forward. I think that creates a mess down the road then if we're talking about impasse on 14 different things because we did or didn't get there. Does that make sense?
But the focus.
That's my concern. It's not talking about permissive topics. It's just, what are we actually agreeing to negotiate for that given year? Does that make sense?
well, like we said at the beginning, when you look at our Article 12 in our contract, which is hours and amounts of work, that's one topic there. That's one deal. Now, I don't think with this process, I really do think with the IBB process in year-round negotiating, I don't think we're going to bring 17 issues. And I think, quite frankly, we brought a lot of issues last year because we hadn't done issue statements and we had to do them on our own, and we were trying to be following what the training Stephanie told us was each issue statement should be on its own sheet. Don't clump them together. Whereas, as we saw, some of them naturally did go together. So I think, and I'm not on the team, so I was really good today. I was really trying to, we have to be careful. I understand the interest of the board to not go to impasse. But this process is going to be hindered if we don't really feel like this collaborative process of negotiations avoids impasse. Because we hear, more than anything else, we hear the reasoning through discussion why one side or the other is struggling with that. And then we problem solve and we come together. And I think impasse has happened more frequently in the last several years because we didn't go at it from problem solving. We were really two sides trying to come away with a win for our side, if you will. That's very simplified. But I think one reason why we were so successful with this process last year and came up with a contract was because you saw a lot of progress that gets made, not necessarily contract language. There's progress made when you understand and can articulate to people why the district has a concern or feels this way about something and why our members or just certified staff feel that way. So I know nobody wants to go through what we went through in 1920. And nobody wants to really go to impasse. Most of the time, gosh, the idea that we're going to start earlier and really work towards things and have as our goal to have a contract early, I think that collectively gives us a purpose to work together. But, and I understand your role, Rachel. You have a unique role because you are, you're the attorney and all that. But I think one of the things when we come back to January is we have to come back and say, we are really collectively wanting to work towards a common goal of coming to an agreement And with the beauty of IBB is it's not just okay, we did negotiations, put it on the shelf, and we'll worry about that again in 9 months. No, we get the meat of what needs to be handled in the contract, and then the team can continue to talk about things that don't have to be language, but collectively, it's good to have those discussions, not always just the NEA president and the superintendent, because these are the people that are in various levels of the classroom and different levels of expertise in the district, and, a lot more minds trying to resolve something. So, sorry, I went way on, but.
No, I agree with all of that sentiment.
I think too that we were very successful last year. I mean, we had some hiccups, and we have along the way, but we're also all going to be better at it. We're going to be better at writing interest statements. We're going to be able to really hone in on what is important and prioritize our interest statements coming in for the sake of a collaborative process. So I'm still hopeful that we can make that work. I think training together will be good, because we can talk about some of those things that are important to you all, and that Rachel, a lot falls with her in making sure that we're doing it and protecting the district legally, right? So I feel really good that we can get there. I'm also going to suggest that we stop because Jay is hungry. And Linda, I'm either really tired and heard you say none of us want to go through, we went through in 1920, but I think maybe you meant 2019 or
19-20.
The 1920
1920
contract.
school year.
I think I said 1920, but.
I was thinking that was the Spanish flu in 1920.
Yeah.
I think.
Yes,
Then
yes,
I
that was
like,
the
maybe I'm just
Spanish.
really tired and heard it wrong.
I don't even know what I'm saying.
I'm with you. That's where I am right now. I would almost suggest we
what do
meet at
we-
7 a.m. and not 3 o'clock.
Oh, gosh. No.
I feel like you don't know me at all.
I'm not better at 7 a.m.
What can we do to try, and again, I'm not saying this is an MOU, I need to think a little bit more, because I'm just gonna be honest with you, I have concerns about sloppiness of the process, and I have concerns that, that's not anyone, that's on us, and sloppiness and overcomfortability, led to the misunderstandings and hurt feelings when we talked about the teachers who were gonna have to change grade levels or whatever it was, that issue. So I need to think a little bit more about how we can, a solution that does take that stress off the opening of the notice letters and anyone having to identify things as negotiable or not, but also doesn't get us to a place where we don't want to be, or I never want the NEA team members to feel like we're refusing to negotiate on something or refusing to IBB something. So I don't know that I need to just have some little time and space to think about it a little bit more. So, because I don't want to create that impression. And maybe it is that during interest, we say our interest is in retaining our management right under this, and that we have enough trust as a team that I don't feel like I'm going to get beat up over that.
Yes,
Yes?
but also if it's a fundamental difference of opinion, then we are going to need help to get through it.
Right. Oh, or agreed upon way that we resolve that if, I think I'm circling on an idea in my head, but an agreed upon way that we resolve that if we're at really an impasse on, I think one team says we need a solution that incorporates language into the P&A, and another team says, I don't think we can do that.
Well, we have a nice octagon right here. I'm sure we can figure something out.
Well,
And guys, the further you go down this
Yeah.
IBB road, the more you're going to really, truly feel like one team, the more you guys are going to be invested jointly, mutually on getting contracts. It's just, you're just not quite there yet. And if there is something that can be done that gives a level of the interest that was identified earlier, a comfort level and transparency so that there can be trust, in a way that doesn't break down others' trust, then, you could figure that out. But I've heard a couple people say we should probably end and people need just time to think. In terms of Rachel and Jill, me connecting with you the very first week of January to figure out what all we need to incorporate in the training. And then do you think that what you've got right now in this document that Lindsay and Rachel started filling in the pieces, is that something you want to pick up prior to the training, where we have this group together prior to the training to try to finalize this? Or what thoughts do you have in terms of when we get together again?
I think maybe if I can draft something out and then we come with a small team, I don't care if it's people who are or not at this table, but maybe, because I really needed to hear the interest, because I was really fearful that if I just started writing something down and gave it to you, it would be like, what the heck is this? This is so far away from our interests or whatever. I think now that I have them, I could do something better, and then maybe I can, when I get that done, and I'll get it done as soon as possible, send a draft to you, and then you can decide how we could like sit down and finalize it.
Yeah.
Whether that's, you and Linda and me and Michelle, or it doesn't matter to me, and then we could do like what we've done before and bring what the group has done to the team to review at our next meeting, because then that would align with the process of maybe annually reviewing the MOU at the start of every meeting.
Well, our next meeting would be that January date. I think it was the 21st. I just had my calendar open that we said would be the training. So do you want to try to get something in prior to that date so that this is sort of put the rest prior
I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
I'd like to send it to you before Christmas. And to give, because then you guys can read it and say, okay, well, let's have these people and these people come together for a work session. We don't like this. This doesn't capture it. We can hammer it out. I'm going to try and keep it simple and not tie us in and not be overly complex. Because I do get what you were saying. I understand what you're saying. I do.
Well, and Rachel, I want to acknowledge, I know that like this puts you in a really unique and awkward situation, and especially with last year. I think last year was hard for the district, hard for the board. It was definitely no cakewalk for any of us who were on the team either. So like, I know it was tough. We had no fun either. I don't know how we do it, but I think we all have to at some point start moving forward, because I think if we keep talking about it, it just keeps it in our hearts and keeps it in our minds, and we're just kind of holding on to it versus how do we move forward. So just, but like I said, it was not an enjoyable experience for us either.
I'll do a joint, okay,
Yeah.
great. I'll do a joint statement and share it tonight, and then do my sort of homework on drafting something up.
Okay.
And then hopefully we'll have something to present to the team in our January meeting.
Okay, guys, just let me know, if you end up adding a date in January that you would like me to be on, please let me know. And then also, I want to tell you all, Survey Monkey, I didn't want you guys to do a Survey Monkey with some questions about the relational components of this committee. I didn't want you to do it, prior to the holidays and then sort of not really deal with it until the training. So you will get a Survey Monkey after the first of the year. It'll come from Rachel or Jill. And just make sure that everybody participates. It is anonymous. I don't know who says what. And it's not anything that takes us backwards. It just enables people to give some input on, like I think Dr. Hubbard referred to, there were ups and downs, right? So that everybody can have some perspective and grow from the ups and downs. So, okay. Do you guys need time? I'm going to drop off. Should I leave the meeting open or should I close it?
You can close it.
Oh, you all are together. I forget. So many people I'm with are not together. Okay. Well, hey, happy holidays to everyone. Okay. Stay safe and I'll see you after the first of the year.